Helle, we are so looking forward to hearing from you and to being on the voyage of discovery that I know you're happy to share with us. So Helle, thank you. Over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sandra, for having me join you to talk about developing sustainable decision-making for boards. And I was so pleased to hear, well, both Ian, but also keep saying this morning, our first speakers in terms of the importance of having board of directors making informed decisions. And I can tell you that the next picture here is from Davos, yes, during the World Economic Forum. This was back in 2019. And I've worked for 30 years with companies, and I have found so many companies that have had great projects when it comes to environment projects or social projects. I worked with IKEA in terms of their code of conduct all over the world, with Nike when they had the sweatshop issues, and with a lot of other companies. And I found that many companies did great things, but it was not embedded into the governance. It was at best something that the CEO, perhaps even the board of directors, said, see, we have a sustainability report that won an award. Aren't we good? And then over to the next. And I believe that we were seeing so many mega trends that was that if we did not have the leaders to really understand the impact the companies had on society, on their employees, on all the stakeholders, and understand on the other way around that impact have on the company, well, it was hard to make well-informed decisions if you're not well-informed. So back 2019, decided that I had Paul Polman, the backing of, at that point, the CEO of Unilever, Paul Polman, the chair of Unilever at that point, Michael Tresco, and other great leaders, the chair of Maersk and Siemens and others that said, yes, we believe that you're right. We need, as board of directors, to have this insight in order to make these informed decisions. So here we were in Davos thinking that the whole world thought the same. I was met with so much that why should board of directors know about sustainability, know about environment, social issues? Ain't it enough that it's just the CEO? Fair enough, but this is not something that should be on the agenda of the board of directors. That is, ladies and gentlemen, 2019. I was out pleading to different leaders to say this is something that should be important. And lo and behold, more and more joined. But 2019, 2 years ago, very, very few board members thought that this should be on the agenda, and for that matter, the CEOs. So fast forward, well, actually, some of these leaders were with me at that point. Just give you a little bit about the competent boards. And Sandra, you were saying we provide climate, ESG, competent board certificate and designation programs where we train board of directors and executives and investor relations or investors, asset managers from all over the world. And to do that, I have had the pleasure of working with, and now we have over 100, I think we're closer to 150 global leaders, and you see some of them here that are contributing with their insight, they're contributing with their experience, and they're joining to have a conversation, just as we just had now, but with global leaders from everywhere around the world. So yesterday I had Mervyn King, who Nelson Mandela asked to do the King report out of South Africa, discussing with leaders from Australia, getting up in the middle of the night, to Africa, Latin America, India, different parts of others of Asia, Europe, and North America. So that global discussion of really understanding what are all of these issues that are hitting the boardroom. And apart from having these leaders, I can tell you that I was very proud, I think that's fair, say when Carlyle, and some of you might know Carlyle private equity firm, went out earlier this year and said that they had now got this ESG linked loan, and the first of that matters, and they put out a press release, and I'm going to show you the next slide, because you see a little bit more why I was very intrigued and happy and proud. The last point here: improving ESG outcomes through better governance by providing ESG competent board training for all Carlyle board directors. So I now have their directors going through our programs. But the reason why I'm also putting this forward is that, to me, the road towards greener, brighter future for businesses goes through the education of those leaders that are making decisions. Because we can't have that we say, well, all of these things we're doing, but if we don't understand the subject matter and understand how to make decisions based on it. So we talked a little bit about ESG, we talked environment, social governance, we talked a little bit about sustainability, just to let you know both the subjects that we are covering in the program, but also perhaps to broaden up a little bit. When I say ESG or sustainability, I mean, what are human rights issues also in the supply chain? I also with what are diversity, equity, inclusion issues? What does that mean in the boardroom and beyond? What about the responsible use of cybersecurity? What about the cybersecurity? And then there is the issue on tax, investment, and pay. Another issue that I was told, why are you having that as part of the program? I think we all now know that we're talking about a minimum global tax of 15%, but also that how do we invest now means what kind of stranded assets are companies going to have sitting on their balance sheet, and the pay. What does the incentive program look like in the company? How are we paying not only the C-suite, but everyone else? What's the incentives in that regard? Engagement and disclosure. We saw during COP26 that we now have IFRS, so the International Financial Reporting Standards, that are joining forces, being merged with SASB, that was the sustainability board out of the US, that had merged with integrated reporting. But now we're going to see we are having these standards that will probably be under the same scrutiny as financial standards. So companies, board of directors that don't understand how to read not only the profit and loss, income statement, and balance sheet, but also the sustainability matters and how that impact also the financials. I think we need to have that education in place. And then, as I just said, in the future of good corporate governance, and what does that look like? So this is just to tell you that what we do is that we then have global leaders that come and discuss these matters with people. People get ahead of time a lot of toolbox to really understand the subject matter and to be prepared to go in and ask questions, but also understand the answers. Because I think that's one of the things that I see more and more, is that we have a cheat sheet with questions, but if we don't understand the answers, well, we're not really having the impact we can have. Very briefly, we said also in terms of climate, so we produced a program that also help directors and senior executives in terms of understanding climate. We did that together with Oxford Business School and with Thunderbird Global School of Management and Arizona State University. This is another one from our faculty. You might know Martin Wolf. That said, no country can effectively hedge itself against climate change in the long run. And I think it goes back to what we just also heard from Ian and Rachel, that we need to think connected. We need to have an integrated mindset and understand what are the impact one issue in one country can have on others. So Martin and I have had good conversations about climate and also the economic impact, but also sustainability, a broader term. So some of you might say, so what's the issue? We have Ian saying that this has been on the board for years, etc. And I just mentioned the Paul Pullman of the world. Unfortunately, we are in a very dire situation, if you can call it that. If we look at the competences that are boards at the moment. This is back from the start of the year, but Tansy Whelan from New York Stern went out and looked at companies and their board of directors and saw how many have credentials when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to social, environmental, governance matters. And you'll see here that out of these 1,188 Fortune 100 board directors, she found that 21% of them had experience when it comes to social issues, 6% when it comes to environment, and 6% to governance, which I was very surprised on, but I've learned that that's actually widely accepted, that we have the good secretary of the board, as some would say, that know about the governance. This is no longer what other people such as Chris James from Engine Number One, who is another one of our faculty member. You might have heard that Engine Number One had, in terms of ExxonMobil, and had now 3 new board members on ExxonMobil. We see these, you can call them activist investors, or you can call them investors that are going in and asking the questions. This is not good enough. Another thing is that this is also tempting, but we're seeing more and more that we need to integrate material ESG opportunities into the strategy. And again, think about it from a board of directors point of view, being responsible for the oversight. We need to have the insight and the foresight in order to actually could provide that oversight. A very new survey that just came out here a few weeks ago. This is the second that these organizations have done. A year ago, they showed that 17% of those board members serving on a committee wherein the board, they had the oversight. 17% of those board members that was in committees that had in their mandate saying that they should oversee sustainability, ESG, climate, had the competences to do so. I went out and said, oh, so what if we had 17% of those board members serving on an audit committee that were able to read profit loss income statement? Would we be happy with that? And the good Paul Pullman, who have a few more followers than I have on Twitter and other social media, put that out, and of course got a lot of feedback. No, we would not be happy if only 17% of those that were supposed to oversee the financials were able to read it. The same, I would say, we need to ensure that the board of directors overseeing sustainability, ESG matters, need to have the competences, need to understand the ABC of ESG in order to actually provide that oversight. You see here, I said 17% last year. Now this organization have changed. So we're no longer talking about ESG competence, but consciousness. So out of those board of directors that serves on committees, and these are the 100 largest companies in the world, they went in and looked at it and say, how many of those are conscious about environmental, social governance issues? They came up with 40% this year, but they also looked at how many of these have a formal education, and that was 8%. And I'm very proud of all of these people that go through the ESG Competent Board Certificate and Designation Program, but it's of course a drop in the sea compared to all of these directors. So this is what I'm so proud with Carlisle are going out and pushing, that we will have more ESG climate competent board members that are making the decisions on where is it that we as a company should go in the future. So a few other insights, and Sandra, stop me here if I'm taking too much time, but we put out last year a survey about the future of boardroom competences. And if you download the report, you'll see there's a lot of great quotes, including from actually His Royal Highness, but here I took in terms of Katie Taylor. What is our purpose? Why do we exist? How will we sustain this business over the next 50 to 100 years successfully and profitably for all of our stakeholders? Those are very essential conversations for boards. Those are the kind of conversations that I'm hearing now from all of those that are going through the programs. They're getting the confidence, they're getting the insight, they're getting the experience, they're hearing from all of their peers around the world and having that conversation. But just a few things about our findings. So what we found was that continue learning, we need to not just say, I learned something when I went to school, and now I had a great career. We need to stay curious. We need to stay learning. And this board member that you see here, we got all the results, and I was like, no, we can't say 87% believes that an integrity is important. It does not work like that. So that's why you can see the word clouds that we put up here. So we put up this word clouds of like this person that I have a global understanding, use the brain, use the heart, and the hand is also in terms of action. So you'll see some of the parts here, and I'll just go into the brain and the heart and the hand, but ethics and integrity, so important parts. And I think trust is one of the things, and also discussing that with the World Economic Forum, such an important issue. It's been an important issue for so many years, but today companies are more trusted than governments and others. Companies are for many larger than countries, and they have this function called the board of directors to look out into the future. So we really need to say, what is the responsibility? What is the purpose also of the board of directors? And you see some of the findings here. I'm not going to go into all these, but it's everything from integrity, transparent, accountable, long-term focus, emotional, intelligent, listen, being open listener and adaptive, purpose-driven. And I think all of those, what's important for me is that none of these are standalone. All of these are kind of like, you need to balance all of it in also culture driven. In terms of the competences here, you see, again, SDGs. Sandra, you showed the Sustainable Development Goals at the start, and I don't know if you can see, but I have the SDG pin here. The Sustainable Development Goals, and I have them here. The 17 largest pain points of the world, but also the 17 largest opportunities of the world. And I think that that's important to have that. Climate is, of course, part of that, but also understand the supply chain, understand technology, understand the transformational leadership. We are in a situation right now where we're talking about transition plans all the time. Change is hard. And if you don't understand how to have that transformational leadership and lead that, well, we're not going to come that far. Others would say being wise, being a sense maker, and clearly stakeholder focused. Getting to the heart, where I also have being wise, being humble, have empathy, curious, inclusive, committed to diversity and equity, courage, as the good Paul Pullman and I have been discussing so many times. And in this entrepreneurship, again, we are in a situation right now where we need to think differently. We need to think integrated. We need to bring all of these things to life. So having that entrepreneurial mindset and being adaptive, I think is going to be, well, it is, and it will continue to be so important. So with that, I perhaps just want to go into a few steps in terms of decision making. And this is from an article I think I wrote for NACD, but so the first part on this is to have this ESG and climate literacy. Understand the ABC of environment, social governance, sustainability, climate, whatever we call it. And understand that, do we need more education? Of course, I will say yes, we all need more education all the time. Yesterday, I had a conversation with two amazing people about the ocean and understanding how the impact in the ocean will impact also us on land, etc. I'm learning all the time, and I would urge everyone to say, let's learn all the time. The other thing, and that's more business-like, okay, who are our most material stakeholders? What are their concerns? Not yesterday, not only today. What will be their concerns tomorrow, in a year from now, 2 years from now? Have that foresight to understand that, because that will put you in a much better situation to then adapt to those concerns, expectations. What are the material ESG risk and opportunities? And what are the potential impacts? I just said in terms of the board committees, I was interviewed yesterday by Wall Street Journal in terms of also governance issues, and was asked, what are the most optimal structure for board of directors? And I couldn't help myself saying, well, yes, a committee is a good thing, because we can then focus on different matters of the board of directors. We need to ensure that it's not just, yes, we also have a committee, but we have people serving on that ESG or sustainability committee that not necessarily have more experience than they had yesterday, where they served on the audit committee or they served on the other committees. So just to have the title is not enough. You need to actually have the competence to serve on those committees. And in my mind, you need to have everyone on the board that have the expertise to ask the questions and to understand the answers. Accountability. I'm an accountant by training and a business lawyer, so accountability means a lot, but I think it means even more today. We are all being held accountable. Those things about shouting all the great things at COP and then going into the dark rooms and whispering what we're really doing, not going to work anymore. You need to be accountable. And that goes into what are the strategic decision making, both within the organization, but also in the value chain. What are the impact of the supply chain? What's the impact on the customers? Maersk shipping. Well, one thing is that they part of the competent boards. Kim Hagemann-Snap, who is the chair of Maersk, but looking into what customers are demanding of them in terms of the carbon footprint of the shipping. And I've worked with them way back in terms of what does that mean. So how do we ensure that we have the decision making and we work together with our full value chain? Incentives. I've said many times that I can walk into a company and look at the incentives and figure out where are the risks and where are the opportunities. Unfortunately, we put up incentives that sometimes have unintended consequences. So I urge everyone to look at the incentives in the company and see, okay, do we actually get what we expect to out of the incentives? Reporting, disclosure, we'll see more and more, both in my part of the world, the SEC, but I just talked about the IFRS. We have from Europe, the EFRAG. I just talked to China, people within China yesterday, in terms of also all of the reporting requirement coming up in Asia. There'll be more and more, and it goes to being also transparent. Ensure the company's response to ESG demands are aligned with the materiality and proportionality of the issue. I see from time to time that, oh, there's an issue that's popping up, and then we need to go out and respond to it. That shows to me that we don't have a plan internally, that we don't have total understanding of what are the most material issues. I also think it's important that we ensure that what we say one place is also what we say somewhere else. We've had a lot of great, perhaps not so great examples of companies that have publicly said something, but then being caught by having talked to associations, or you can call it lobbyists, or you can call it others, to do exactly the opposite. I think we are going to see that being, flashed a big light on that. So again, that greenwashing or green wishing, we need to get away from that. And that gets to having a proactive dialogue with peers, with policymakers, investors, and other stakeholders. This one is just to tell you, like World Economic Forum, in terms of the climate competent boards, they put out a great report a few years ago, and a lot more is happening. So I think, well, okay, integrated reporting, I just want to put that up as a means. I did the first integrated report in the world for Novozymes, work with Mervyn King on integrated reporting, and a lot of others. I believe that if we need to have the integrated thinking, and that lends itself also to integrated reporting. Oh my goodness. Okay, two more slides, I guess. My book that's coming out here very soon, it's called Stewards of the Future, a guide for competent boards. And what I'm doing is that I'm put the insight from many global leaders into the book in order to hopefully help many more global leaders. In the book, you'll find a tool assessment that board of directors companies can use to assess where do they see themselves on these different areas, where do they need to focus. Got a lot of fantastic reviews that I'm very happy for. With that, I think there was also one, from World Economic Forum. You just mentioned them before, so Olivier Schwab from World Economic Forum, and of course Paul Pullman and many others. So with that, Sandra, I think I will say thank you and take questions.
Right. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Helle. So much to share with us. And I know you've just come out with your book, and you've been busy doing interviews with the Wall Street Journal and others about your lessons and your guidance in this area. And I love the fact you talk about you know, your head, your hands, your heart, you bring it all together in terms of what does it mean. It's raised a lot of questions and comments from our guests. And the first one I'd like to call on is Susan Hooper. Susan, if Reg can find you and if you can unmute yourself. Wonderful, thank you. Susan.
Hi, Helle. Thanks very much. That was great, and I'm so glad that you are preaching these words to everyone, because we need more and more converts at board level. But just a very quick background. I co-founded Chapter Zero, which does exactly this in trying to, you know, help board members get up the learning curve and everything. And one of the things we keep on coming across is defining what climate competency means. It's very you know, it's very hard to be specific about that. And I had the rather embarrassing situation that after 4 years of specializing in this area, one of the investors said to the board upon which I sat and was advising on these matters, you've got a great plan, but you don't have any competency on your board. And I realized that there are no standards, you know, and at first, of course, I took it personally. And then I realized, well, how would they know that what I've been doing? You know, there's no document to say this. There's no education that I received. It's something I did on my own. That being said, relative to many, I'm streets ahead on this topic, but that's not necessarily seen by the investors, and the investors need to understand this. So the question really is, how do you define climate competency, and how do you enable investors to take confidence that the boards do have it when they do have it?
I love that, and I'm a big fan of Chapter Zero, and I'm talking to do these and many others in that regard. And actually, one of the things we are talking about is what you're bringing up, and I guess also why I found that in the start I was saying, well, I want to have this insight out to as many as possible, and I asked these global leaders, do you want to help me? And then it came up that you need a certificate, you need a designation. And when I talk to the ISS of the world, when I talk to other, you know, asset managers, federated Hermes, etc., it helps them. It helps them when they can say, yes, this person have this certificate. Yes, we, you know, our programs are endorsed by the Good Governance Academy. So Mervyn King out of South Africa. So that's, you know, help them to say, yes, now you have a piece of paper, in the same way as, you know, to be an accountant, I needed to go through an exam. And I think that does not mean, Susan, that you don't have all of these competences right now, because you have, but having a piece of paper on it, right, and having the certificate, that shows that. I think what I know that both with Tansy and what also the sustainability boardroom, I think they called out of Singapore, is doing, they're going in and looking at the bios of people in, you know, the 10K or the reports, and saying, what does the bios say that these people have that are serving on the board? I know Leslie Seidman, who's been through our programs, serves on Moody's board and on GE's board, have it in her bio in the annual report, the financials, and in the proxy statements, simply to show it. So there, I think, just to go, they're kind of like, you can say I have all of these competences, and you know, I can argue I have, and others, but how do we communicate that? And I think that's where people have said that by having the certificate and you know, can include that's helpful. Oh, you're on mute.
No, I wasn't able to unmute myself, I'm afraid. I think maybe someone realized I'd talked too much. Just one last thought about that, though. Given the speed with which change needs to happen, does this piece of paper really make sense?
I think we need to ensure that it continues updating, and that's why, you know, you'll see that we're kind of like updating on a continuous basis, but also updating people that go through it, so they get what are all the new things all the time. It's if I had known how much updating I had to do, and that's also why we're talking also with chapter 0 in terms of saying how can you have so much great material, how can we also see if we can embed some of that. So I think it's ongoing, like everything else, right? If I continue to sign financial statements, I couldn't just say, oh, I got that exam X number of years ago, now I can still do it, because we need to understand everything moving so fast.
Thank you.
On that note, and again, thank you, Susan, for a really important question. And Helle, you've had much to share with us, and there are some really great questions I would have loved us to have had a chance to get into, but unfortunately we've got to go on to our next session. And again, perhaps I can invite, if you're open to that, some of our guests to liaise directly with you on the questions that they've asked, because there's some interesting ones there. So Helle, thank you. Really appreciate that.